Morning, James. You asked me to show you how to work through task 46 from the booklet that you had before Easter. So here we've got the question that we can have a look at together. So the balance on the business's sales ledger control account at the 31st of December was 12,467. So first of all, you need to ask yourself, what does that mean? And we know that any balance in the sales ledger control account is telling you what your customers owe you. Things that you own and other things that other people have of yours are known as assets. And you'll remember from Dear Clip, asset entries are always on the debit side of the account. So if your customers owe you 12,467, that's an asset and it needs to go on the debit side of the sales ledger control account. So we'll write that in and we write balance brought down because that's what's owed at the start of the month. Now we need to look at each of the bullet points in turn. So number 1 says the sales returns daybook was undercast by £100. So let's have a look at our sales returns daybook and remind ourselves of the theory. So a sales returns daybook's used when your customers send you back some goods and you issue them with a credit note for the amount that they no longer have to pay you. So we write into the sales returns daybook the credit note, and we write each of the figures that were on the credit note, the total, the VAT and the net. And through the week or through the month, each time we issue a credit note, we write it into the sales returns daybook. At the end of the accounting period, we add up each of the columns, and it's these totals that go into our general ledger. So that's where our double entry takes place. Now the total box, that always goes to the sales ledger control account. The VAT column always goes to the VAT account, and the net in the sales returns daybook goes to the sales returns account. Now the sales returns is lowering what your customers owe you. So if what we put on the sales ledger control account when they owed us money was on the debit side, if they now owe us less in order to reduce that figure, it would have to go on to the credit side. So the figure from the totals column of the sales returns daybook would go on to the credit side of the sales ledger control account. Now, number 1 tells us that we undercast this column. That means when we added up these 3 figures, when we put the answer into the totals box, we hadn't added it up correctly and the number was less than it should have been. So we'd put less than we should have done on the credit side of the sales ledger control account. So in order to correct that, we need to add in that £100. So bullet point 1, we're going to write in our £100 that we didn't write in before. And in the details, we're going to put sales returns because that's the name of where the other account is. So the sales returns account would have a debit entry for £100 if it wasn't already on there. If we have got VAT, that would also go on the debit side because our VAT and our net columns, when you add them together, will come to the total of our credit in the sales ledger control account. Number 2, a payment from one customer had been correctly entered into the cash book as £340, but had been entered into the sales ledger as £430. Now, remembering your theory, the sales ledger is not part of the double entry system. We're using it just as a subsidiary account, or known as a memorandum account. It's made up of all your customer accounts, and we only put figures in there to remind us exactly which customers owe us money. The total of what our customers owe us goes in the sales ledger control account, but we break it down so that the business can know who to chase payment from which customers. Therefore, if it's the sales ledger that had the amount that was the error, it doesn't actually affect our sales ledger control account because our sales ledger control account was correctly done. So we don't need to put anything into our sales ledger control account for bullet point 2. Bullet point 3 says an irrecoverable debt of £250 had been written off in the sales ledger but had not been entered into the general ledger accounts. General ledger accounts is where our double entry goes, and our sales ledger control account is part of that general ledger. And therefore we need to correct this account. Now the double entry for irrecoverable debt is that we always debit the irrecoverable debt account and we credit the sales ledger control account. If there was VAT, we'd also debit the VAT account. We know that we're going to debit the irrecoverable account because that's an expense account. And Dear Clip tells us that when we put figures into an expense account, they're always on the debit side. So we've learnt that in the sales ledger control account, there needs to be a credit. And we know it's a credit because it's reducing what our customers owe us. And if what our customers owe us was on the debit side, if we want to reduce that figure, we need to put it onto the credit side. So we need to put £250 onto the credit side of the sales ledger control account. That's showing us that we know we're no longer going to get £250 that was included in the balance brought down. Probably the customer's gone bust, so gone into receivership and they can no longer pay you the money. So we need to make sure we take it out of the accounts because we're no longer going to get it. So bullet point number 3 was on the credit side of the sales ledger control account. And again, in the details, we need to write where the main other entry was. And that was in the irrecoverable debt account. Okay. Bullet point 4 says a balance of £169 due from one customer had been omitted from the list of sales ledger balances. And the word omitted means left out of. So they'd left it out of the sales ledger. It means they'd left it out of an individual customer's account. It doesn't say anything about the general ledger being wrong or the double entry being wrong, so nothing needs altering in the sales ledger control account. So the sales ledger control account has now been updated for the points in the bullets that are relevant. So the next thing we need to do is balance this account. So we put our totals boxes level on both the debit and the credit side, and we look to see which side is the highest, and it's our debit side. So we write the balance in on both sides, remembering that everything we do on a debit also has to have a credit somewhere else. So we've got our debit and credit. The credit side of our sales ledger control account doesn't add up to 12,467, so we need to put a balancing figure in to make sure it does. When it's above the totals figure, it's balance CD. If we take the 100 and the 250, add them together, that's £350. If we take that away from the totals box, you can see that we get a balancing figure of £12,117. And we'd bring that down onto the debit side, balance brought down, £12,117. So we've put something on the credit side and then we've also put it on the debit. So we've now balanced our accounts properly. Now we still haven't taken count of 2 of the bullet points. So let's have a look at those. So the question says we've got a list of balances and it tells us that the total was £11,858. Now bullet point 2 says a payment from one customer had been correctly entered in the cash book. So that's a book of prime entry, and we know that then the double entry must have been correct but it had been entered in the sales ledger as £430. That means there's a difference of £90. £90 incorrect. We'd written off £90. So we are showing that our customer owes us £90 less than they should do, because we didn't actually get £90 worth into the bank account. So we're going to put error 2, and we're going to put our £90 here to show that we need to add it to what our customers owe us. We also didn't do bullet point 4. And this one said a balance of £169 due from one customer had been left off, omitted from the list of sales balances. So if we've got a balance from a customer that's owing to us, we need to also add that to our list of balances. Okay, it was left off. So then we need to add these up. And we find that we've got £12,117 that's owing from our customers. We've now balanced the sales ledger control account with the list of balances because the two figures are the same. The total of our list of balances now agrees with the balance brought down figure on our sales ledger control account. So when you've had time to look at your question again, cover up your answer and see if you can have a go and make it agree with what I've just shown you. If you've got any other problems, just email me and I'll get back to you. Thanks, James. Good luck.